You are listening to the Yavornitskiy Code podcast that was created to commemorate 170 years from the birth of Dmytro Yavornitskiy, a prominent Ukrainian historian, a chronicler of Zaporozhian Cossacks, and a keeper of the national memory. This project is implemented by local and cultural society DIYA, that means activation, with the support of the Ukrainian Cultural Foundation. Media partner is D1 TV channel. Today we are going to talk about Dmytro Yavornitskiy, but not as a historian or museum curator. We are going to tell you about Dmytro Yavornitskiy as a prominent public man and a man of culture. He was the person who formed Ukrainian identity at the times when Ukrainian lands were under the power of empires, first Russian and then Soviet Empire afterwards. Dmytro Yavornitskiy was a charismatic influencer and a person whom people trusted and to whom they listened to. Dmytro Yavornitskiy was one of the representatives of Ukrainian intelligent cultured class who fought for the national culture, national consciousness, and future of Ukrainian statehood. We have mentioned earlier that Dmytro Yavornitskiy was born to an impoverished noble family in Slobozhanщina, Slobodian Ukraine, region in the northeast of Ukraine, which borders ethnic Russian territories. In the middle of the 19th century, the imperial policy aimed to supersede everything Ukrainian from communication, culture, education, and consciousness. Therefore, it wasn't surprising that Dmytro Yavornitskiy, as a son of a priest, spoke Russian as he grew up. The period of time when Dmytro Yavornitskiy was a student at Kharkiv University fell on challenging time for everything that had to do with Ukrainian language and culture. Russian Empire had just implemented strict restrictions. It was forbidden to publish books in Ukrainian, restricted opportunities to be educated in Ukrainian, and superseded Ukrainian language from cultural life. In spite of that repressive time, young Dmytro Yavornitskiy chose Zaporozhian Cossacks as the subject for his scientific study and made his choice in favor of Ukrainian identity. He joined Kharkiv Historical Philological Society, where he worked under the guidance of Alexander Potebnya, an outstanding linguist. Also, he became part of Kharkiv Cultural Society, which grouped around Yakov Shogolev, a Ukrainian poet. The members of that cultural society believed that Ukraine had right for its own language, culture, and history. As he explored the history of Zaporozhian Cossacks, he made sure they fought for freedom of Ukrainian lands and saw for himself how unjustly and cruelly acted the empire towards Zaporozhian Cossacks and freedom-loving Ukrainian people. Therefore, Dmytro Yavornitskiy presented exactly from that perspective. His activities far exceeded his academic career. He was not afraid to stand for the following crucial things: culture, language, and historical memory. In 1883, he gave the first public lecture on the history of Zaporozhian Cossacks. Since then, public speaking in front of large audience became a part of his life. Not only it advanced the spread of knowledge and scientific information, but it made Dmytro Yavornitskiy a prominent person of public life and a real influencer. He was invited to give lectures in Kharkiv, Katerinoslav, Poltava, St. Petersburg, and Moscow. There was full house at his lectures. Even those people who had no interest in history before attended his lectures and were absorbed with his sincere, enthusiastic manner of narration about Zaporozhian Cossacks, Ukrainian people, and the past of Ukraine. At the same time, his activities were accompanied with serious pressure on the part of imperial power due to his ideas, which the power considered as Ukrainophile, that means sympathizing to Ukraine. For this reason, Dmytro Yavornitskiy was persecuted and was not allowed to teach. His ideas and lectures were considered too democratic. Moreover, he didn't get permission to uphold his doctoral thesis, although he never stopped working as he considered his scientific activity and educational activities as his true mission to restore and preserve the national memory. Personality of Dmytro Yavornitskiy played great part in the fact that he became not only a scientist, but an authentic public man. He was full of energy, charismatic, pertinacious in a good meaning of this word. He never gave up when others did. He had natural ability to inspire people, both with a word and with an action. In his young years, Dmytro Yavornitskiy became a part of prestigious archaeological societies of that time, Moscow Archaeological Society and Imperial Archaeological Society. He met not only well-known historians and archaeologists there and started co-working with them, but he also met with influential noblemen who were keen on archaeology and organized archaeological excavations in their lands and domains. Almost 20 years Dmytro Yavornitskiy spent outside of Ukraine, in St. Petersburg, Moscow, Central Asia, and Warsaw. Yet, whenever he went, he stayed quite active and prime activist in Ukrainian communities abroad. Acute sense of national consciousness, deep concern for the destiny of oppressed Ukrainian people, its language, culture, and memory determined active public attitude which consistently had in cultural public movement. During the late 1880s, Dmytro Yavornitskiy lived in St. Petersburg and was actively involved in the activities of the local Ukrainian community. He regularly took part in meetings with the artists and the author events, where he was in touch with outstanding artists, scientists, and cultural critics. His humble rented apartment became a real cultural center, a place where intellectual, artists, and students who first and foremost were his countrymen from Ukraine. Those meetings were known as Saturday gatherings, and they became centers of informal Ukrainian cultural fellowship in St. Petersburg. Among regular visitors of the Saturday meetings were prominent personalities such as artists Ilya Repin, Mykola Samokish, Sergei Vasilkivsky, a theater director Marko Kropivnitsky, and actors from his theater, authors Dmytro Mordovtsev, Kesar Belilovsky, Pavlo Stebnitsky, Pavlo Chizhevsky, Mikhailo Mogilyansky, an ethnographer Fedir Vovk, a historian Dmytro Doroshenko, patron of literature and art, and a publisher Yevgen Chikalenko, and many others. Public activities of Dmytro Yavornitskiy, his fascinating lectures on history of Zaporozhian Cossacks in particular, were of great interest for lots of people. However, imperial authorities kept an eye on him. Due to popularization of Ukrainian history, taking an active part in national movement and Ukrainophilism, Dmytro Yavornitskiy was deprived of opportunities to teach. In 1891, he was made to leave St. Petersburg, and he spent 3 years in Central Asia, where he first worked in Tashkent and then in Samarkand. Dmytro Yavornitskiy talked about his forced mission as an exile. However, Dmytro Yavornitskiy didn't quit his public and scientific activities despite difficult circumstances far away from home. He took time to research archaeological sites of the East, was busy with ethnography, and compiled guidebooks. Yet the main thing was that he became a part of active local Ukrainian community. The major outcome of his time in Central Asia was establishing of Samarkand Historical Museum on his initiative. That museum still operates. Dmytro Yavornitskiy went on with his active public activities in Warsaw, Poland, and Moscow, where he worked in the 1890s. Despite being far away from Ukrainian lands, he managed to unite Ukrainians, supported cultural life in the community, organized meetings, discussions, encouraged young scientists and artists. Yet the most important period in his life started when Dmytro Yavornitskiy returned to Ukraine. In 1902, the scientist was invited to Katerinoslav, present-day Dnipro, a city in the central part of Ukraine. He was invited to be at the head of the newly formed historical museum named after Alexander Paul. In this city, Dmytro Yavornitskiy was able to practice and to fulfill his talent of a researcher, an organizer, and an educator. That move was a turning point in his life. Not only he set up the biggest museum in Ukraine, but also he made a significant impact on the cultural development of that large enterprise center, which was quite a provincial city at that time. Dmytro Yavornitskiy organized scientific and cultural events, united active community, was one of the founders and an honorary chairperson of Prosvita, that means enlightenment, cultural community. He also took an active part to establish Katerinoslav University, where he accepted the call to the chair of knowledge of Ukrainian things. In quite Russified Katerinoslav, he piloted Ukrainian ideals both in culture and education. Dmytro Yavornitskiy published books and newspapers in Ukrainian, gave public lectures, was engaged in educational and enlightening activities. He had an authority with different groups of people in the city, including the town hall, where they respected the opinion of Professor Yavornitskiy. During 35 years, Dmytro Yavornitskiy was a symbol of the cultural life of the city, a defender for historical memory, and an influencer of that time. Not surprising that he is called as a guardian angel of the city and a Ukrainian Yavor, sycamore of Pridniprovia, that means Dnipro areas. When Soviet Bolshevik came to power in 1918-1919, the attitude of new authorities towards Dmytro Yavornitskiy was quite suspicious, though he had never been a politician and never declared against Soviet regime. Nevertheless, Yavornitskiy had high prestige in the city. Townspeople respected him as a scientist, an enlightener, museum curator, and organizer of cultural events. That was his prestige in the community, his influence and own opinion, popularity among townspeople and students that arose suspicious attitude on the part of authorities. First, they kept him under secret surveillance, limited his public activities. As of 1933, the situation got worse. Dmytro Yavornitskiy was officially displaced from the job of a head of a museum curator. Later, he was pronounced to be an ideologist and inspirator of counter-revolutionary underground group. Actually, the Soviet authorities put blame upon him for his influence on people, and that people trusted him and listened to him more than to any official slogans. Until then, his public activities were the reason for the city to be proud of. Yet it became evidence to unreliability. Repressions, isolation, and stress worsened the health of the scientists. Dmytro Yavornitskiy passed away in 1940. Lots of people gathered at his funeral, all those who respected and remembered him and who were not afraid. It was like a final confirmation. Dmytro Yavornitskiy was an authentic people's academician. In this episode, we talked about Dmytro Yavornitskiy not as a historian, but as an opinion former, the person who was not afraid to stand for his beliefs, go against the system, inspire other people, and to be living fire during dark times. His life is an example of how a personal devotion to history and culture may be a real compass for other generations. And his life's work is a unique code which helps us to understand our roots and keep our Ukrainian national consciousness.